Do you see ABM as being specific for that category of client, or do you think it works across the board?
So I think like fundamentally all B2B marketing is account-based marketing.
What is truly an effective ABM strategy in today's market?
Nothing in the entire world builds trust like being in the same room as someone.
Absolutely does. And what you said is amazing because I really wish that from higher up, that could be like a rule that gets given to the sales team. What are some of the metrics that matter most in ABM?
You actually have to change the organization, like the revenue organization's KPIs.
What are maybe some other tips at convincing the sales team?
Biggest and most effective medium for new business, new logos especially, is word of mouth.
Welcome everybody to another episode of SaaS Stories. Today I'm super excited to be joined by Andrew Seidman, co-founder of Digital Reach Agency, a fellow ABMer all the way from New York. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Joe.
Now, ABM, it's sort of become a little bit of a buzzword in B2B, even though it's been around for years and years and years. I'd love to get your perspective on what is truly an effective ABM strategy in today's market.
Yeah, well, even just to comment quickly on this idea of it being like a buzzword, I think a long time ago, people realized that selling in B2B entirely is account-based. Like you never sell directly to a consumer, like you're always selling to some organization. And I think people perceived that this was a valuable like paradigm shift from how they had worked previously, which was entirely like lead-based movements. But the reason why it has been mostly a buzzword and less action is because to actually do it requires this big paradigm shift of how you run an organization. And so the answer to your question of like what makes a great ABM organization, it's one that actually takes an account-based view or approach to going to market. And I'll give you an example of like a really common way that organizations struggle with this. So many organizations have like an inside sales team or a team that responds to outbound, like BDRs, SDRs. Almost invariably, those people are incentivized by a quota of meetings set. Like they have to get like 10 meetings per month or something like that booked. So for them, the quality of the account is not relevant to them. There's no incentive associated with like, oh, I need to, instead of booking this like a warm lead from Joe's Crab Shack that just like came through the form where I can go get one of my meetings booked, call it good. I should instead drop that lead and focus on developing the IBM account and like do research into, the buying committee and the org chart at this organization no one will probably ever talk to me at. And that single example, I think, highlights the difference between really good orgs and really kind of struggling orgs with ABM. Is like the really good orgs, they get it. They've said, okay, how about this? Instead of a quota of 10 meetings, we'll give you 1 point for Joe's Crab Shack. We'll give you 100 points for a meeting with IBM. And if you get that meeting, you'll make your quota for the year. And so you can balance the scales in a way that is actually account-based. But most organizations are still kind of stuck. They would like to be thinking about this in an account-based paradigm, but they're still kind of in a lead-based paradigm, if that makes sense.
Absolutely does. And what you said is amazing because I really wish that from higher up, that could be like a rule that gets given to the sales team because I run into so much trouble. Marketing's all on board. They want to try ABM. They know it's effective. And then they create a meeting with sales and they're like, you're going to have to convince them because you're right. They're not just going to drop everything and suddenly start working on, target accounts and economic buyers and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think what you said, it kind of made me think of a good approach is going in there and saying, well, we're going to help you with those meetings and we need to create a little bit of change management here. But what are maybe some other tips at convincing the sales team, especially in organizations where that, higher up, they're not going to get that support. They're still going to be looking at those KPIs.
I think it's not even just the sales team too. Like it is anyone who has, let's say, short time horizons for their KPIs. We see this in marketing too. Like marketers also struggle to get out of the lead-based approach because you can
Yeah.
show real progress with leads quickly. right? You can say, I'm getting wins under the belt. Now, they may not be the types of wins that will like leverage your company into a really powerful brand position and like, the real kinds of like logos you really want, but you can actually like put something on paper. Whereas nurturing like a big account um, for a long time, while it might be more valuable to the business on the whole, like it's harder to show that immediate win or like that, hey, like here's a very short-term metric that really worked. There are metrics you can do, but again, they require a paradigm shift of like how you do reporting and what your data looks like and so forth. But to answer your question about like how do you convince the sales team, honestly, it's the same way that I think you have to convince the marketing team, which is you actually have to change the organization, like the revenue organization's KPIs. And that usually comes from the CEO or
Mm.
some mix, like chief revenue officer, like somebody with enough influence to actually have control over what the incentives will really look like. Some good examples of this are like you can just set acquisition goals for a certain tier of accounts. You can say like, our company cares about getting 10 new logo accounts from our top 100. And like that is the success metric that will be graded on. However many leads you get or whatever is fine, but like we have this metric that's really important to us. Where this gets really, really tricky is everybody is on some kind of economic like time pressure. And so if you're a startup, you're looking to your next round, like you need to hit some number of revenue for the next round. And so you don't actually have time to be, let's say, philosophically accurate as to, okay, this might be the best thing for the business over a 20-year time horizon. But also, if we don't hit our numbers this quarter, we're not raising another round and the company dies. So it's like you kind of have to balance the short-term pressure that is really can be kind of like lead focused, like meetings focused, like let's get some stuff moving with like, okay, but actually what will make us the most successful company or like will actually get us to the next level. So I think it's actually really difficult to set those incentives regardless, but you usually need, really, really high level CE level, like kind of incentive setting to make the whole thing work.
Yeah, good point. Really interesting. And I think a lot of companies, they're willing to do that for the big whales or the enterprise level clients that they're going to land. Do you see ABM as being specific for that category of client, or do you think it works across the board?
So yeah, I think like fundamentally all B2B marketing is account-based marketing.
Yeah.
And so I think if you took your known universe of like addressable market, let's say it's, I don't know, 5,000 companies or something like that, 10,000 companies. The ABM approach is effective, is essentially what you're going to do regardless to all of those accounts in some form. The way that I like to think about tiering or like segmenting out like a tier of like really valuable small white glove accounts versus like kind of maybe some middle value accounts to like the long tail of additional accounts is just that actually one thing ABM is designed to do well is to align your resources with the outcomes, which is to say, if the long tail accounts are all roughly the same, like if Joe's Crab Shack is worth roughly the same as like, Emily's cake shop or whatever, if they're all the same, then you don't really need to do much personalization to like differentiate yourself between those two experiences. Like from your perspective, you're just as happy getting either one as a lead or a customer. Um, but then many organizations will have a big difference between like the local small business or like mid-market business versus some really large business. So in this sense, like it's an improvement upon old school, like lead generation, demand generation stuff, where you're kind of evenly distributing your effort across the entire market. Whereas in this case, you're distributing your effort based on the expected value of those accounts. So you're still doing ABM, you're just not putting as much resources into the accounts that are like less valuable on a per account basis, and you're putting more resources into the ones that are more valuable. So I think, yeah, you're always doing ABM. It's just like question of how intense the extra effort is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess one to many versus one to one, and all the different levels of personalization that come with that. Um, going into the weeds a little bit of ABM, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see companies make with ABM?
That's a great question. I think one of the common ones is, well, I guess I'll start with kind of the key one, the key mistake that is probably the biggest mistake, which is folks decide to change their inputs, like these are the things that we're going to do ABM. They're like, we're going to market to this account list, we're going to do these things differently and so forth. But they don't change the goals or like the KPIs that they're going after. So they might say like, oh, we're going to focus on driving attention from these 100 accounts instead of 10,000 accounts that we normally focus on. And then they say ABM's not working, our lead count's way down. And like the way we evaluate success is by the number of new leads, and we have so few new leads now that like it's a failure. And it's like, well, the KPI of lead volume doesn't make sense if you're looking at 10 accounts, right? It makes sense when you're looking at the the long tail of all these other things, but like it's just not a very good KPI. So I think the most common mistake I see is that folks actually don't start with a good definition of what success of the program would look like. And often this is metrics that you don't currently have in your system. So the one that we often get brought in to build is like account engagement or account lifecycle. Like, do you have milestones similar to like a lead lifecycle? Do you have milestones at which an account reaches degree of qualifications? So the way we do this usually is like an aggregate of all of the contacts engagement plus some of the demographics associated or firmographics associated with the account. And you can start to see like account funnel movement over time, basically. So like that is a metric that we recommend, but most organizations are nowhere near able to like run with that thing. So they often will just start off with pure lead generation and kind of wonder what's going wrong. So I think aligning on that one is like the one that kind of stands out maximally to me as like this is like the biggest problem. But there's a bunch of things that kind of waterfall from that, where it's like you're not developing your programs in alignment with those KPIs. Like your teams are all kind of like scattered in their in their KPIs. Often there's another mistake that people think that personalization is kind of the key to doing this. Like like somehow if you're going to change the ad, instead of saying like, oh, this this is for B2B companies, it's like, oh, this is for B2B like insurance companies, like that's now going to suddenly like launch your program forward into make millions and millions of extra dollars. So they often like go for things that are a little bit more superficial than what I think the really meaningful stuff is, which is maybe how well do you define what makes a great customer of yours? Who are the people at those existing great customers who love you, and what do they say? Like, how do they talk about you? How well do you maintain your relationship with your advocates, like your entry points into prospective, like really large new engagements? So I think folks often go about it in a little bit of reverse order, where they think they're going to penetrate these super valuable accounts through like nifty top of funnel techniques. Whereas like in actuality, it's a lot more about having a great brand, having a great word of mouth presence, putting out really, really good content that your advocates are sharing. Like it's a lot, there's a lot more like deeper philosophical and substantive work to be done than I think like the often impulse is just like, we bought demand based, we're going to run personalized one-to-one ads and like everything should be good now, right? It's like, well, it's not quite how it works.
I love that you said that actually. I've definitely run into this problem myself. And I think, yeah, setting KPIs from the get-go is one thing that a lot of companies can get wrong. I think you mentioned there as well, I suppose awareness versus, what's already in the funnel. And this is another mistake I see is when people start ABM, they're still focused on net new logos and they completely forget about who's already in the CRM that has engaged. Um, what are some specific marketing campaigns that you've seen work really well for moving, the leads that are in the funnel into across the pipeline stages, I suppose?
Well, I think when you're in the pre-sales or in the kind of like what most marketers would consider their part of the funnel that they own, um, again, I would like start immediately on like thinking about your brand quality, your offer, what is it that you're actually bringing? Because I think a lot of folks tend to skip over that part and assume that that because they know and love their product, that like everyone else will know and love their product in the same way, which is often a big mistake. Like it's often the way that you talk about or think about your product internally might be completely different than the way that your market talks and thinks about it. So I think starting first and foremost with like, what is the content like that you're planning on producing, like what's the brand message that you're carrying and so forth. From a tactical perspective, once you have a really great set of offers and really good content, we do something called sequential retargeting, digital reach, where we are basically aligning your content and your audience by funnel stage and potentially other segments as well. But so you often see this, you see this from cold emails all the time, for example. Here's a great example of a bad cold email. Hey, we've never met before. Can I put time on your calendar? It's like, no, that's like a very big ask. I don't know you. Don't have a lot of time for this. But the cold emails that I've gotten that have really been helpful have been like, or like good, like, hey, do you ever struggle with problem XYZ? And I'm gonna be like, yeah, actually, I'm struggling with that problem right now. And it's just like, oh, cool. Like, here's a few resources that I think are valuable in solving that. Like, let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to be helpful. Right? It's a process where he is or she is aligning with me. Where am I in this process before we get to a conversation that is ready to buy? Now you can do this in advertising, you can do it with emails, you can do it with all kinds of media, but like we would never show an unaware upper funnel audience like request a demo or talk to sales CTA. Like we're so that's like from a what would you do to align these things in the pre-sales area? I also, per the previous question, I also want to just call out that like most marketers just stop their field of vision like at the opportunity creation or opportunity close. Like that's kind of like, okay, we're done marketing now. Like that's it. The biggest and most effective medium for new business, new logos especially, is word of mouth. And so you actually, your job is not done until you have converted that individual into an advocate who is referring more new business to you. So we have a metric that we really love, which I stole it from someone. I can't forget who I stole it from, but it is number of new referral customers per month divided by number of churned customers per month. What is the net virality of our service offering? And if we are churning customers faster than we are getting referred new customers, it means like we're not viral. We actually need a big injection of marketing and sales to sustain our growth because we're losing the clients faster than they're gaining us on themselves. That said, if we're gaining the clients sort of organically and naturally, then we have we have sort of like the type of thing that ends up leading to like viral, like massive growth, which makes marketing look really, really good.
Absolutely. I always say, ABM can play a huge part in customer success as well. I think it's so crucial to, like you said, get referrals from expanding different departments within that organization. People know each other, and it's so much easier and quicker to do that than, convert and convince a brand new customer. You mentioned cold email. I'm actually super surprised that in this day and age that still can work really well. And I think it's about landing, exactly what you said, that pain point that they have, like right time, right place. They do respond to that cold email. And it made me think of intent data because, in a way with intent data, you're supposed to find out exactly who those people are and deliver that message to them. How are you finding intent data tools like Six Sense, Demand Base, all of those when it comes to your account-based strategies? Do you think they're pretty effective, or is it very hit and miss?
I think intent data is a very cool innovation. I guess not that new, but a very cool like additive function. I don't know if it by itself, similar to many other like really valuable like tactics, for example, like I don't know if by itself it can overcome the other parts of a go-to-market that are really critical. So it will give you some directional information as to whether or not someone is more or less likely to engage with your offer. But for example, like going back to email marketing here for a second, like let's say that you have somebody that you got intent data that this account is engaged in your product area. And again, if you email them and you say, hey, let me send you a calendar invite, like let's get on the phone. That person still has no pre-existing relationship or trust with you, even if they're interested in your area, which again, even that is just directional and kind of fuzzy. like it's still pretty likely that they will not find your message resonant at all. So the best way that I have to think about this is like emails just are ads. They're ads that are served in the inbox. If you've done marketing on both of them, you know, like, okay, well, you make a headline, which is like your subject little text, and then like you make a subheader like in the ad, but that's your like preview text over here. Like you've just got a few characters to make your pitch. And so I
Mm.
think the the key element of making either of these successful, intent data agnostic, is is your is the quality of your offer aligned with the where someone is at in their journey. And intent data can help refine some of this, especially on the advertising front, can help you refine a little bit of like how accurate are we likely to be. But I think it still kind of doesn't, it's less important than the bigger picture question of like, is my offer appropriate for the person I'm talking to?
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned ads there, and it just made me think of something I personally struggle a lot with. And even with one-to-one and one-to-few ABM, we still have to target these people, but the audience size is quite small. And so campaigns like LinkedIn, Google, where they require, a minimum audience size of say 300 to 1,000, how do you tackle personalization and those types of campaigns, when you're running one-to-one or one-to-few ABM?
Well, the first thing again, I would there's a natural temptation to fall into the same type of like lead generation or demand generation trap of saying the like all these impressions are roughly created equal, and so therefore like we like getting fewer impressions or something is bad. The idea of these smaller ad or campaign groups or campaigns or whatever it is, audiences that you're looking at, like the idea of it is that each of those impressions is far more valuable than like your normal impressions or your normal campaigns are. And so in that sense, it could be completely fine to have a very small number of overall impressions, so long as those impressions are super valuable. That's kind of like this question of like how much is your resources or your effort aligned with the value of the customer that you're going for. That said, there is a size that is too small to run. So there's some balancing point you want to find between how accurate and narrow and precise am I versus for the effort that I'm putting in versus like how likely am I actually to claim any real estate here at all. One thing that I often will do about this is I will like expand the audiences a little bit and imagine that this like material is often going to get circulated. Like if you're doing a good job with your offer, even if you don't reach the director level or the C level or the EVP or something like that, maybe you reach a manager who like circulates it across other people and so forth. So yeah, I think it's worth doing, even if it's a smaller audience than you would get otherwise.
Just coming back to ABM, and what are some of the metrics that matter most in ABM? I still have, people when running an ABM campaign talk about things like MQLs, SQLs, and I'm trying to get them away from that, and into some of the other metrics. What do you find is the most successful metric to measure? And maybe like in the early days, like within a 90-day cycle, because
Yeah.
obviously everyone wants, revenue and profits and new wins. But what are some of those early metrics that we should be looking at?
The first one that I think is a nice way to bridge the gap between like demand gen lead generation methodologies versus like account-based methods is the idea of like matched leads. So you're still counting leads, but you're only counting leads that are matched to accounts on your list. And so in this sense, you might still say like, oh, we have a demand gen program, which by the way, you can run a lead gen program at the same time as an ABM program and do them together. So you could say, oh, we're still driving all the leads we were driving before, but now we're also evaluating what percentage of those or what's the total count that are matched to our account list. So I think that is like a pretty quick way of getting like an account-based metric without doing a lot of heavy data lifting or anything like that. So I think that's like the first place that I would often start. Personally, when our like we have a RevOps division in our company, when our RevOps team builds like a lead scoring and a lead lifecycle infrastructure, we just build an account one at the same time. So ideally, if we have been brought in to build like funnel and reporting apparatus in the first place, we would have built the account lifecycle as part of that. And then we would report on how many marketing qualified, how many engaged accounts, like what is the overall flow of accounts in the lifecycle. So I would say those two are kind of like the immediate ones that I am often jumping into. Also, ideally people will be reporting on like booked meetings and revenue and like pipeline, like deeper pipeline metrics. But often those just take a while. Like often your cycle is going to last a little bit of time. And so like starting off by, I need to see the total pipeline generated by this program in the first month. Well, it's probably going to be zero. Like it's probably going to take a long time for us to develop and nurture these big accounts, or these target accounts at least, into something that is actually turning up in the pipeline, if that makes sense.
Does, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Getting into the weeds of ABM a little bit again, we spoke about emails, we spoke about ads. What are some other channels that you have found really effective? For example, programmatic events, roundtables, anything that really stands out in the world of ABM? And I suppose, let's say specifically, we're trying to influence the C-suite here.
Yeah, I would say that's not how I would think about programmatic. Programmatic has value in providing brand credibility and additional brand kind of reference points, brand recollection, that when your name then comes up, there's more likelihood of you being trusted. But almost certainly the C-level is rarely making those kinds of evaluations themselves immediately. They are almost always getting some people on their team to do the evaluations and make recommendations. And then from there, they're going to kind of like make a value choice. And programmatic can be helpful in that, but I think, selfishly, like Demandbase and Sixth Sense and these other types of companies, they want to believe that if you spend a bunch of money doing programmatic ads towards your target account list, that's going to turn into meetings with the C-suite. Probably not directly how that works. Like it probably has some positive influence, but it's not where I would necessarily look first. But you mentioned another medium that I think is probably the single most valuable medium, and that is events. We would say like field also. I mentioned before how word of mouth is this like incredibly powerful thing. And that is because for very technical things, like if you're selling something in a product space, all technical products run into what I think of as like the auto mechanic problem, which is, I don't know about you, Joe, I don't know if you're a car person, but like I'm not an auto mechanic. So if my car breaks, I go to
I'm
a shop
stuck.
and the shop tells me it's going to cost $5,000 to fix this.
Yeah.
No, I have no idea. I'm actually not capable of knowing whether this person is telling the truth or not. And even if I go to another auto mechanic and get a second opinion, and they say, "Oh no, this is 5,000." Do I trust both of them now, or do I think like no, they're both trying to rip me off? Like it's very difficult to know these things, and so as a result, the decision is almost entirely based off of trust. Who makes you feel like you could trust them? In fact, two people giving you the exact same quote, you're going to pick the one that you trust more, regardless, even if the quote is the same. So, in high level enterprise, C-level selling, it is almost exclusively a game of trust and
Mm.
who is going to be trusting you more than others. And nothing in the entire world builds trust like being in the same room as someone. And so if you can actually have a real conversation where they can get an emotional sense of what your company and your product are like, who the people are that work there, what it would be like to be in a partnership with you. I think that goes much further than basically every other medium combined. But you got to be able to qualify yourself. So like when you get in that conversation, you have to have a website that looks great. You have to have content that looks great, collateral that's really good. You have to have your case studies and your other, there's these like prerequisites that you need to have to avoid disqualifying yourself.
Mm.
And then you ideally have done such a great job of nurturing those advocates and evangelists of your brand already that there's like an army of people that are ready to introduce you and ready to vouch for you. And
Mm.
so this is, again, I say marketers often put the cart ahead of the horse and they just focus on this like lead to MQL zone, whereas most of their revenue actually comes from converting customers to evangelists, which can be done with careful attention, great product experience, like a timely gift, like what are they doing for their birthday? Something like this can really help say, hey, this has become an exceptional experience. I know I'm on a long-winded rant right now, but I'll
No, I love it. Keep going. That's good.
conclude it with one idea here, which is I've talked about this in other podcasts as well, where this company, I don't know if you know the company Zappos, the American shoe sales company. But their whole thing was just, we're going to make an exceptional experience. And we know that
Mm,
what we're doing is in some ways commoditized, like other people sell shoes on the internet. And that's, we get it. Our differentiator, our brand is going to be that the experience is exceptional. And and they did it to the point where anybody who ever had a customer experience issue at Zappos, like was so much better. Like their customer support people could just send you cookies if they felt like it. They could just do whatever they wanted to make sure that the experience was exceptional. And as a result, like millions of customers for life who would never shop anywhere else. And so I think as a marketer, I think we do ourselves a little bit of a disservice by not thinking critically about, okay, how are we going to nurture all these contacts, customers into evangelists, get their case studies, get their quotes, get their referrals, hang out with them at parties, do these things. We spend way too much time trying to generate new relationships from like cold,
mm,
and nowhere near enough time like nurturing the people who will actually grow the revenue org.
yeah,
Brad,
yeah.
it's complete.
No, that's a really good point. It's so true. I think as marketers, we're so focused on content. What can we put out there? You mentioned gift giving and cookies. That's actually, why don't we send that to people that we're already in relationships with? And I think with ABM, I've seen good ABM where we are trying to nurture the people that are already in the CRM, where there's already existing relationships. Maybe there's already been a meeting, one or two. However, there's now this gap where no one's really communicating or doing anything after that meeting. Do you find gift giving in that instance could help, start the next conversation?
Oh yeah, I am a huge believer in giving gifts and showing like extra touches of like special care, but not as a cold medium. It's actually like really, and again, I think this is self-serving from the people who like run these like gifting companies who would like to position this as, if you send 10,000 $25 gift cards, like that will give you a bunch of new business. Whereas what I find has been very effective
Mommy, I guess the decorate
is the like, that somebody really loves Italian food because you had a conversation with them about it once, and you send them a $100, $150 gift card to an Italian restaurant near their house to take them and their husband out for a nice dinner. And it's like that thing feels like a friend. It feels like a really nice personal thing. Like you just really value it. It's really lovely. The impersonal $25 Starbucks gift card feels like kind of weird and like not very natural and like out of the flow of like a normal human interaction. And so I think gifting is an insanely valuable, like we've given gifts up to like, you know, like many thousands of dollars for like very fancy experiences, because like this person really stuck their neck out to help us. And it wasn't like a quid pro quo. It wasn't like we give you this gift and you give us like something back. It's like, hey, just thank you for like sticking your neck out for us. The way that person did this like earned us a lot of pipeline, like was a very, very valuable thing to do, but was like really because they did something special. And so we were like, we're not going to limit ourselves to like $100 gift card here. Like we're going to take this person out to the French Laundry. Like this is like a special thing that they have done for us. So I would say being, again, like in the mission of converting customers into advocates, like honestly, there's probably very little limit you should think about for what would be like a good gift, so long as it's in the flow of like the normal engagement.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Andrew, I feel really bad. I haven't asked you any questions about yourself. I was so excited to have someone with ABM expertise on this podcast. I just dived straight into that. But tell me a little bit about digital reach, and how you got started.
Yeah. So actually I've been talking about this a lot lately because we just unrolled or are in the process of unrolling a new product this year that I'm really excited about. But it has to do with where we came from very much. So we were founded almost 13 years ago, approaching 13 years, as a pure, actually at the time, just paid search, just did paid search ads, small businesses, like literally type in a word on Google, find out who's advertising for it, call them up and say, hey, I noticed you were advertising for lampshades, you know, let us help you manage your ads. So totally bootstrapped. And then over time, people asked us for more and more things. Like they asked us for like social media advertising or SEO. And then we started to uncover that the solutions to these things were actually super interdependent on one another. Like if you wanted to do a good job of advertising, it wasn't just what is the keyword list, but it's also what's the landing page, like what's the website like. So we started building these additional point solutions of like, okay, we build and design websites. Now we have this digital experience, like mini agency. People needed reports, but like if you've ever done reporting work, it's not just the actual report, it's the data that goes into the report. And so it's like that ended up in this like RevOps thing where we became experts in the stack and understanding the CRM, and we hired Salesforce and Marketo and HubSpot people and so forth. And so we had the pipeline generation stuff, like we had those things, we had the RevOps team, we had the digital experience team. And then maybe in the last like 3 years, it just became very clear that the brand and the content were like critical defining factors, that you couldn't actually make any of this stuff work if you didn't have good brand alignment. So we built a kind of brand and content strategy agency that sort of is all part of this. So this was kind of where we were, have been, with these kind of four critical point solutions. And we have this kind of understanding of how they all like work together. And so a couple of years ago, we sold a new thing that was like, we call it a holistic retainer. And the idea was like, you would buy like a block of hours, it's like 100 hours a month, and we would give you whatever you want. And you need creative work, you need data work, you need like advertising work, like we'll just do whatever you want. And it was really easy to sell. People really seemed to like it. And it was like a horrible experience, like a terrible failure and mistake in most cases, because the client's priorities were not super well organized. Our priorities were not super well organized. And the clients would kind of put their hands into the cookie jar and the hours would just evaporate. And it would put our CSMs in this like horrible position where a client stakeholder would say, I need my landing page to be done by Thursday. It's going live on Thursday. And our CSM would say, I'm so sorry. Like, if you want that to go live, you have to pay us $5,000 more dollars. And it was like a horrible, like extortion-y feeling for everyone, our internal teams and the clients. So we scrapped this product painfully, and eventually kind of came to this new product, which is actually really instead focused on right sizing the engagement with the need, which is to say, instead of trying to level up an organization from like, level 101 of their paid search to level 501 and become like incredibly sophisticated, you're doing offline conversion importing, you're like doing all these things. Can we just level the entire go-to-market up by one step? So your problem might not be that you need the world's best ad architecture. Like you might need just a good ad architecture, but also like a good report, a good data system, like a good asset, something like that. So we built this maturity model basically to align on where folks actually are and what's valuable for them. And so we've been selling these like as a roadmap to figure out where are you on your maturity model? What are the things that make the most sense for you to do next? And it's been really exciting. So very long answer to the story, but like that is a kind of the evolution of DRA from originally just a super point solution based org now into like a pretty sophisticated like go-to-market agency that kind of matches our clients' level of maturity and ability to grow.
That's really interesting. I've certainly been there with the pricing models as well. It's so tough to get it right, I suppose, as an agency. And it just makes me think we've done the hourly, pick your hours type thing before. And With people have kind of felt like they're paying lawyers in a way, like, oh, is everything billable here?
Totally, totally. It's not a good, like, if you think about Zappos and their like amazing customer experience, like this was not that, right? Like no one likes paying their lawyer. You know what I mean? It's like, did that really take you half an hour? Did that really take you 45 minutes? You know, and so I think we agree. Like it was not a great customer experience.
Now, I happen to know you've got a background in high stakes poker. Tell me, how has this shaped your analyzing risk, maybe pattern recognition when it comes to marketing and ABM?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I played poker professionally for maybe 8 years, like a very formative period of my life. And one of the core things that is maybe the most important takeaway is just to understand that in a variant environment, um, the process matters and the results are not that important. Which is to say, in gambling, you might find yourself in a situation where, due to good process, you will win this pot 4 out of 5 times. You can't guarantee perfection. You can't guarantee I'll always win it, but like 4 out of 5 times is pretty good. And then you might just lose that pot over and over and over again for like a year. And it's very tempting to say, maybe I'm doing this badly. Maybe I'm not winning. The results are bad. But the process is actually quite good. Like the process is putting you in a really advantageous position. And so you're kind of like you need to be able to separate that process from the outcomes. So marketing, for example, especially ABM marketing with like a smaller audience size, the degree of variance is really high. Like you're trying to catch not just the right person at the right time, but the right person at the right time within a very specific narrow account. Like there's just not that many times that that's going to be the case. And so understanding that like, oh, we might just blank this for several months at a time before we maybe like hit the big opportunity that's going to tip us over the edge. So I think there's like uh there's something to be said about like understanding and being tolerant of like risk and variance and that kind of thing that I think is different like when you come from a gambling background. So I think that's a huge thing. And the other thing is just like, emotionally not to get too high or too low. Like I think it's tempting to be ecstatic when you're closing a bunch of business and you're hitting all your numbers, and to be like in despair when you're missing your numbers and so forth. And in gambling, you're just kind of always on a curve in some sense. And so being comfortable being on the curve, I guess, is another way of putting it.
Put it that way, they do feel like very similar things, don't they? The poker and the marketing. That's really interesting. I love that take on it. My last question for you. Uh, if you could go back in time, what is one piece of advice you would give yourself?
One piece of advice I would give myself going back in time, that's, not deep at all or anything like that. That's challenging. I think so in a funny sense, like a bunch of my job has changed from being a marketer to more being a leader. Like I still do a lot of marketing, but it's more about like leading people at this point in a lot of ways. And I think if I could go back in time, I would have like told myself to allow myself to be more vulnerable and to lead more from a position of like transparency and honesty. And sometimes that's really hard. Like it actually means, somebody is not, performing up to the standard. And like there's an impulse to be like, I want to provide discipline and I want to like, you know, like be hold their feet to the fire kind of thing. But in actuality, it's like I'm kind of just anxious. Like I am worried. And this person is actually on my side. Like they're on my team. And so being able to change the picture from one of which like is sort of more like confrontational to one that's more collaborative, I think starts from a position of personal vulnerability, which is also the truth in sales and in like interacting with people in general. Like one of my favorite interview questions is just anything that the person doesn't know, just to see if they say they don't know. Because if they tell me that they don't know, I'm gonna trust them forever. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I think like that's probably one of the places I would start. I would also like I learned a lot of this from hiring a coach, and I think I would probably simplify things by just going back in time and telling myself to hire a coach much earlier, because there's a lot to learn.
Love that. I think managing people is one of the hardest things in a business. So yeah, that was really good advice, actually. Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate all the insights into ABM. I've certainly learned a few things. I've been inspired to go and try some other things. So yeah, I really appreciate our chat, and I think that the audience will learn a lot from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. See ya.